In this presentation, I'll be solving a maths problem involving arithmetic sequences and series. So I'm told that the sum of the first four terms of an arithmetic sequence is 34, and the sum of the next four is 146. What is the sum of the ninth and 10th terms? Well, that's the formula, or at least one of the formulae that I'll be using in this presentation. So I need to begin with the sum of the first four terms. And I know that that begins with the very first term, which is A, the second term, which is A plus D, third term, which is A plus 2D, and the fourth term, which is A plus 3D. I need to add all those up, and I've got four A's there, and 1D plus 2D plus 3D gives me 6D. And I know that 4A plus 6D has to equal 34, according to the question, because that's the sum of the first four terms. And now I concern myself with the sum of the next four terms, and that begins with the fifth term, which is equal to A plus 4D, or A plus 5 minus 1D, according to the formula. So yeah, the fifth term is A plus 4D. The sixth term is A plus 5D. Seventh term is A plus 6D. And the eighth term is A plus 7D. Well, I add all those up, and there are four A's there. And 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7D gives me 22D, and all that, according to the question, adds up to 146. So I take those two equations and I minus one from the other. I'm trying to eliminate one of the variables by minusing, and in this case I'm going to eliminate A, and I end up with 16D is equal to 112. I divide both sides by 16 and I get D equals 7. And I take that value of D and I substitute it into that equation there. And I end up with 4A plus 42 is equal to 34. And that gives me A equals minus 2. So the question was, find the sum of the ninth and 10th terms. Well, the ninth term is A plus 8D, and the 10th term is A plus 9D. And if I add them up, A plus A is 2A, and 8D and 9D gives me 17D. But I substitute minus 2 for A. I replace D with 7, and I end up with 115. And that is the answer to this question. But there is another way of doing it. I could have used this formula here. The sum of the n terms, where n is the number of terms, A is the first term in that sequence, and L is the last term. That formula will only work for an arithmetic sequence. Now I want to work out the sum of the first four terms. Now that first term was going to be A, and that last term is going to be the fourth term, which is A plus 3D. And n equals 4, I've got four terms there. And if I substitute that into the formula, I get 4 over 2 multiplied by, in brackets, A plus 3D. And that simplifies to 2 multiplied by, in the brackets, 2A plus 3D. and I end up with 4a plus 6d equals 34. And now I concern myself with the sum of the next four terms using the same formula. But this time my first term is the fifth term, which is a plus 4d, and the last term, which is the eighth term, which is a plus 7d. I substitute those into the equation, and there are four terms, n equals 4, and I simplify that, and I end up with 4a plus 22d equals 146. Now, those two equations are the same two equations I worked out before. And now I can solve those simultaneously, get my value for A and D, and that'll allow me to work out the sum of the ninth and 10th terms as I showed you before. So there's a couple of ways you can go about solving this problem, but both ways are very good. Well, thank you for watching this presentation.